Because the reality is when you're in water and fully submerged, you don't look wet, you look dry. Think about that. Well, you do have two villains in this movie. You've got Orm, aka Ocean Master, and you've got Black Manta, and they both serve very different roles. And certainly with Orm, you've got the family history of being Arthur's half-brother and the current king of Atlantis. Whereas Black Manta would have a very primal vengeance that you discover pretty quickly why with Arthur. With Orm, you've got certainly his history with Arthur, not knowing Arthur, and what you find out is his a loveless marriage between his parents. You see why he's angry, or that's more character building, or destroying rather. Then his fight really is against the surface for polluting the ocean. So it's a very noble cause. It's not that sort of general, I want to take over the world. He's really just angry and gets very violent because of the way that the surface world has been destroying his oceans, rightfully so. You can't create a character like Aquaman and not have a deal with the ocean and the problems in the ocean. I do love the fact that they've left pollution up to Orm to do something about, because I think it enables you to have a much more irrational and maybe violent response that I think is kind of therapeutic for moviegoers, because I think you'd be hard-pressed to find someone who didn't think we were destroying the oceans. And certainly playing the role is maybe much more conscious of that. I mean, I grew up in Florida, I grew up on the water. Water's always been a huge part of my life. And protecting the oceans is something I will say with this movie has opened it up even more. Because even in a superhero movie about a man trying to belong in both worlds, meaning the surface world and Atlantis, you have this undercurrent and this theme of environmentalism, which is of course something we all need to be thinking about. Whenever you play a role, good or bad, you want to find the motivation. And usually when people respond to villains and say, oh, I love playing villains much more, is because usually villains are very, very, very driven. They will stop at nothing to achieve their goal. There's nothing general about Orm. It's not like there's some self-serving purpose of I want to take over the world. That's not his motivation. Do I think he feels like he's the only guy that can rule Atlantis and the only man to become Ocean Master? Sure, and he is a villain, very much so. But I don't think of him in terms of a villain. I think of him as more of an antagonist. So it's how he really is a foil to Arthur, which is really his main role. And certainly, you know, I loved reading why he wanted to do it, and it sets up very clear. If I can get 4 of the 7 kingdoms, undersea kingdoms, to join together, that will make me the Ocean Master, then we can take on the surface world. That's a pretty clear vision right there. I think once we decided that he was going to be the new 52 Orm, because his history is a lot different. When he was originally created, he was the one that was the half-breed, and now Arthur takes that role. So with the new 52, that made him the pure-blooded Atlantean, then I knew we had a good starting point. And then I read, of course, Throne of Atlantis, and every Ocean Master story there's been since the new 52. And you know, you cherry-pick and you try to figure out what works for the script, because it's kind of useless just to have a wash of all the comics and not understand how it fits into this movie, because every choice that I would make has to be informed from what our script and the story that we're trying to tell. So it was me and James getting together and even deciding on his look and, you know, what panels really stuck out to us in the comic, because of course in a comic you not only have the words but the artwork to draw inspiration from. The costumes are pretty unbelievable. I do think Orm has the most amount of wardrobe in the film, which is no shock once you realize a few things about Orm. He likes to preen a little bit. The Ocean Master costume is pretty fantastic. It's these sort of metal scales. We always wanted the audience to wonder what this material is, because we didn't want it to be, obviously not a land-based material, so it's a lot of sort of fish scaly looking things. As far as how it relates to Watchmen, you know, when I played Night Owl, even that was worlds better than what it had been prior. I think each costume designer for these superhero movies, they must talk or certainly understand, like, that's a good idea, let's keep going with that. So they used to be a lot thicker and really hard to move in. And thanks a lot, truthfully, to Cirque du Soleil. Our designers and some of the actual builders of the costume was material that they would use in Cirque du Soleil. So they're made to stretch and move, and that was really important for us, because we did not, those of us underwater. We did not want to look stiff. So the costumes, for the most part, you could move really well in. For all the underwater sequences, we'd be in a big blue screen in a big sound stage, and everything's blue around you, and little pieces of orange tape sort of giving them markers to put in things later. And then, you know, we'd be on anywhere from probably 4 or 5 different types of harnesses or devices that would either suspend you in the air, some you could turn, some you could move yourself, and just trying to find that core strength to make it look like you were swimming but look completely effortless, which there's nothing effortless about it. So that was the goal. We'd sort of film it and go look at the take and go, oh yeah, it looks like your legs are dangling. Like, can you put your legs together a little bit, just move them a little? You know, it was very, very, very technical. I think people have this idea of, oh, you're in wires, it must be so fun, like you're in a big swing, and that's really not what it is really like at all.